Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Elephant in the Room podcast. I am Ariel, and this is my co-host, Chris. And today I am super excited for our guest. Today we have with us Dr. James Madden. And Dr. Madden is a philosopher. He is a professor of philosophy, and he's also most recently an author. And not only does he love the field of philosophy, but he is into UFOs. And that's kind of what his latest book was about, is sort of the crossover between philosophy and UFOs. So we are just super excited to have him on to get to pick his brain. I became aware of him in Diana Pasulka's Red Pill course. I took that a few months ago, and she had him on as a guest speaker. And I just really resonated with his content, everything that he was saying. He has this amazing ability to take complex topics and break them down into easy to digest bite-sized pieces. And so, yeah, we're just excited to have him on and pick his brain. So let's have him on.
All right, I'm super excited. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
All right, so one of the things we talked about before we started is we know you're here to talk about UFOs and you're here to talk about philosophy, but I would be remiss if I didn't start this off with a question about your JiuJitsu practice, because my husband is a JiuJitsu practitioner, and obviously you always become fans of people in like-minded communities. So I know that it's kind of a weird question to start with, but I think it's relevant in the sense of there's so much I feel like neurological connection to JiuJitsu. Maybe I'm wrong, but that I've seen in my husband's life and in his practice. Can you tie in your background and kind of how that relates to everything?
Sure. How long has your husband been training?
Well, we've been talking about that lately. It's a couple of years. He started off and had a terrible triad injury. So he had, his meniscus, all three ligaments in his knee torn. So he was out for quite a bit of time. And then he started back up again. And now he does 10th Planet Nogi, right?
Nogi, yep.
Yep.
Excellent. So. Yeah. So, I mean, okay. So I started JiuJitsu. I've been doing it for 8 years, so I was already in my 40s when I started it. Okay.
Yeah. Him too.
Yeah.
Him too.
Yeah. I'd been an athlete my entire life. I played sports all the way through college and all that, but I got into JiuJitsu. It was actually a birthday. It was the 13th birthday present to my oldest son. Okay. So,
wow.
Yeah. So he wanted to do something like that. And so on his 13th birthday, we got in the car, we did the birds and the bees on the way there, and then we got out and started training. Right. So it was this really cool 13th birthday.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, yeah. Right. And that's kind of become tradition now. So
rites of passage.
Rites of passage, yeah. And so, but I'll say this: I got into JiuJitsu at the same time that there was kind of a turning to my philosophical thought. Okay, and actually, that kind of philosophical thought shows up in both the books that I published last year: the Unidentified Flying HyperObject and Thinking About Thinking. Okay, and both books are expressing a view of cognition that's not my own, but it's kind of the school of thought that I started to work in, that sees that we have a fundamental contact with the real world, but that contact is not at a reflective level of consciousness. It's through a kind of practical dealing with the world. Okay.
Right.
And we're more in touch with the real, the more we can deal in I would even go so far in like literally tangible ways with the world. Okay. And it was interesting to be doing that thinking while, like, for the first time, to start discovering those kinds of philosophical and psychological ideas. At the same time, you learn to practice JiuJitsu, which is very much about learning how to do something with your hands. Okay.
Right.
And in this sort of field of cognitive science, there's a fairly famous example that a philosopher by the name of Hubert Dreyfus uses, where he makes the claim that someone who knows how to drive a speedboat, like a racing boat, knows something about water that like a hydrologist, it's a physicist who studies water, doesn't know. Okay.
Right.
That person can understand all sorts of things about water, but he or she cannot drive a speedboat on water. Okay.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of the real that, like the speedboat driver, is in touch with that no one else is. And the only way you could learn what that is you'd have to learn how to drive a speedboat. There's no way we can articulate it outside of the physical practice of it.
Practical.
Okay? Yeah. So jiu-jitsu is very similar, right? So I think there's something about human bodies that jiu-jitsu practitioners know that no one else knows. And the only way I could begin to explain it to you would be to like have you train jiu-jitsu for 8 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you start to see it. But it can't be stated. It can only be learned through encounter with this real thing. Yeah. So for me, the jiu-jitsu is not accidental to my own like thinking and philosophy of mind.
That's so fascinating. And would you tie that to the concept, and I'm going to get the phrase wrong, I probably should read it, but the techno, what is it? Where you're the third part of the first part of your book, after social conformity, you talk about the
technological extension.
Thank you. Yeah. Technological extension. So is that related to that concept as far as offloading information from our brain and it lives in the world around us?
Yeah, exactly. So here's another example. This example is cited very often, but I'm most aware from another philosopher by the name of Matthew Crawford. Okay. And Crawford gives the example of bartenders. Okay. And you know how there's like a distinctive glass for the martini, right? And there's a kind of a distinctive glass that you would make a Manhattan, right? There's a distinctive kind of glass that you'd pour a beer in. Okay. Well, why is that? Well, it's really because when a bartender gets a complex order, right, he or she can like put the martini glass down and then put the Manhattan glass down and then put the beer glass down in the order that they came in. Okay. So what's happened there is the burden of remembering the order of the drinks and what to make was just taken out of the internal mechanism of the bartender and put into his or her environment. Okay.
Visual management is what it's called in systems work, right?
Yeah. Right. And so now like the actual cognition is not really just going on inside that person's head. It's been extended into an information enriched environment. Okay. And I mean, so think of it like now you're attuned to our ability to do that. Now look around you in the room you're in right now and how much of your cognition has been offloaded into the environment we've constructed for ourselves. Right. And once again, like we mainly think by doing, right. And we mainly do by letting our environment do as much of the thinking work that needs to be done as we possibly can. Okay. And so, yeah, that's also like tied up into the same notion.
So interesting. Ariel.
Well, I mean, I'd like to just, kind of like rewind a little bit and just kind of get your background, because I mean, this intersection between philosophy and UFOs is just very fascinating to me. And so I'd kind of like to hear how you sort of made that transition and sort of, the overlaps and how you've integrated that.
Sure. So like, how did I get into the UFO thing in the first place, or how I got into philosophy in the first place, or all?
Yeah. I mean, how did you how did you start with philosophy, and how did that sort of evolve into sort of meshing the two together?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I literally fell into becoming, a philosopher, or studying philosophy, like completely serendipitously. Like I did not go off to college looking to study philosophy. Okay.
Oh, so you weren't like a child that like was asking all these existential questions and like reading philosophy as like a teen?
Well, kind of, but it didn't occur to me that it's something one would do, with any kind of seriousnness.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my very first memories was I was like riding on my like big wheel, right? Like tricycle thing in my parents' driveway. And I was a little kid and looking at the sky and thinking, well, if there was a nuclear war and all the humans died, would the world still be here? Right. I mean, so I was already like, as a little kid maybe we all have done that. Right. But I had some pretty interesting philosophical thoughts early on, but I basically went off to college to play football. Right. That was it. Okay. And then had to sort of, after my freshman year, transfer schools under strong suggestion from the school I was going to. All right. Okay. So, and then at the new school, my advisor was a professor of philosophy. And, this is the old days. So you registered in person and all the transfers registered the day before classes started. So nothing was full or nothing was open. Right. So And so, my professor, he asked me what I was into, and I said, well, not really anything. Okay. But I did take this class at the last school where we read Marx and we read Nietzsche and we read, some Rousseau. It was a politics class, but it was basically, political philosophy. I said, do you have that sort of thing here? He's like, yes, we have that sort of thing here. So, because he was a professor of philosophy, he was able to talk me into 3 philosophy classes right there. Okay. Just to get my schedule full.
Yeah.
And then I went back to him in like 2 weeks and like, is this your day job? Can you do this for a living? He's like, yeah, but let's not rush into that. And so at that point, like pretty much my education from there on out was almost just philosophy. So I just ran the catalog in my undergraduate school in philosophy. Then I did my master's in philosophy, my PhD in philosophy. And as soon as I realized like this weird stuff that had been on my mind since I was a little kid, like you could do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You feel the study and possibly profession. I didn't look back at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got into philosophy, right? And it had really nothing to do with anything like worry about the UFO or even the anomalous in general. Okay. And that came for me relatively late. I wasn't really interested in the UFO at all until like 2017, 2018, when everyone else got into it, right? Because of the articles and stuff like that. Yeah. And, as I say in the book, I'm this like, if you knew me better, you realize I'm like this cliche Gen X guy, right? I mean, like my senior year in high school was the year Nirvana's Nevermind came out, right? So I'm like right in the middle of the Gen X thing, okay? And so like X-Files, all that stuff, it was the science fiction lore of my youth, okay? But it was nothing that I took seriously, right? But then when the New York Times thing happened and some of the more mainstream acknowledgement of it, the Pentagon acknowledging it, that to me was a game changer. Not that it meant that there's a reality to it, but it seemed like there was a 180 being done here, like where I was like nothing to see here to like, well, we're not going to rule it out, right? Or there are elements within that world we're like pushing hard for and stuff like that. That led me to think, well, this should be looked into.
Yep.
And my gear for looking into things is, philosophy and its scholarship. So I just started reading everything I could get my hands on, and in many ways, a lot of the literature I read was as underwhelming as I expected it to be. Okay. And a lot of it was way greater than my expectations. So when I read people like Jacques Vallée and John Keel, that wow, these are serious scholars, serious thinkers, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. Now I'm intrigued. Right. And then it's off and running for me.
Wow. That's amazing.
And did you have some early exposure to Dr. Pasulka as well? And was that one of the
So I first encountered Diana's work literally just through Amazon. So I'm like, I bought Invisible College and now the algorithm's running and it recommends me that American Cosmic.
Yep.
American Cosmic was interesting to me, and I know this is almost embarrassing, but it's because it was published by Oxford University Press. Okay, and in the academic world, like Oxford University Press is like, it's the establishment, like it's the gold standard. Like if you publish at Oxford, you're officially like a baller in the academic world. Okay, and so that's big. Like I don't think people really fully understand like the fact that like Diana published that book,
it's like a stamp.
Yeah, and it was with Oxford. Suddenly, it's okay for me to like teach it in class now. I don't care, but like, I would hear, but lots of people like now suddenly, the big boys and girls have said it's okay to talk about this. That was very, very big. Wow. Yeah. So I think when people look at this for good or ill, right, whatever their view about it is, they're going to say like Diana Pasulka changed the world on this thing with that book because it came out from Oxford and it wasn't just, hey, here's weird beliefs that weird people have. We're going to study as a sociologist. It was, there's something to this. There's something more to this than I would like to admit. And it came out from Oxford. Okay. That was significant. So when I read that, it's from Oxford, it's from an academic. Okay. And then thirdly, it's, she's got these Heideggerian themes in there. Okay. Mm-hmm. So she's coming at it from a sort of orientation in philosophy. That's where I'm coming at things from.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's resonant.
Can you express what that is to me? Because I don't know.
Yeah. So, so Heidegger was a 20th century German philosopher, and he's probably one of the two most influential philosophers in the 20th century, at least in the Western world. Okay.
Okay.
And so, and the particular so the way I like to note is Diana begins American Cosmic referring to Heidegger, quoting Heidegger, and she ends American Cosmic referring to Heidegger, quoting Heidegger. So there's not a whole lot of Heidegger in the middle, but when someone bookends their book with a thinker, that's significant. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it said to me, the very school of thought that I like is kind of like what I'm trying to stand with. There's something going on with it here. Okay.
Yep.
And that's sort of like, okay, now I think as a philosopher, there's something I could sink my teeth into in this world. Okay.
In this world.
Yeah. And then I'm up and running. And then I'm really thinking. So I finished American Cosmic, and then I actually reached out to Diana, and we began corresponding and stuff like that. And then like research snowballs, right? You read one book, you read another book, and then now suddenly you're thinking on your own, and it dovetails with stuff you're doing, and then that's where culminates in my book, Unidentified Flying HyperObject. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was listening to the conversation that you had with Diana on the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast. So, Kelly Chase kind of set that up. So I was listening to that one, and you guys mentioned Carl Jung, and I was like, you guys didn't spend enough time on it. I'm like, no, go back to Carl Jung, talk more about that, because to me, he's so fascinating because he touches on UFOs, but at his time, he's also exploring, at that time, dreams and synchronicities and other things that at the time weren't associated with the UFO phenomenon. But nowadays, it's very common. Like, we talk about dreams and synchronicities on our show all the time. And so I kind of think, Jung may have been kind of ahead of his time in that way of like how they all can and sort of do overlap. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I am not sure that anyone in the UFO world, right, has advanced the ball beyond what Carl Jung did in his book, Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky, which I think he published in like 1956 or something like that.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm not really sure that anyone's really advanced the ball beyond that. Like, I think there's details that have been added, but and so if you read that book, and you can see it, he develops throughout the book, and it feels initially he wants to give an entirely projective psychological explanation of this, right? He says it's interesting that following World War II, following this massive traumatic event for the world, right, and especially the Western world, and then the introduction of nuclear weapons and the use of nuclear weapons, and humans demonstrating that we do have a massive, grand scale genocidal gear that we will execute based on given what the war happened. Yeah. Now we have atomic weapons, and the Cold War's up and running. So it's a time of absolute anxiety. And then at the same time, we start seeing stuff in the sky, right? That are sort of like, that are sort of like technological things like we used in the war. They're spacecraft, and we interpret them in like militaristic terms and all this. Initially, it sounds like Jung saying, this is our projecting our shadow.
Right.
Our shadow consciousness.
Yeah, it's our shadow consciousness. We're projecting our shadow. And it makes sense that that's what would be on our subconscious collective mind right now. We're worried about nuclear Armageddon and things like that. Yep. And then you get much of that book. He's going to give you, a dream analysis, making sense of that. And he's going to say, here's why they're round, is because the round is this wholeness and all this. And it works. But then you start to get to the end of the book, and he's like, but they seem to leave tracks on the ground. Right.
Yeah.
They show
and you can see him on radar. Yeah.
Yeah, see him on radar. And so Jung, he kind of throws his hands up because you can tell he doesn't want to do this route. Okay. And he actually at times in the book suggests maybe the human collective unconscious can make stuff happen in the world. Like, he hints at it there, right? Mm-hmm. And he does. And you see this in a lot of Jung's later work. He actually says, like, he does the same thing in the synchronicity essay in the book. He says, there's just no way to make sense of the UFO as a physical thing, okay? But there's no way to make sense of it as a non-physical thing. So it looks like our categories of physical and non-physical don't apply here, right? Yeah, okay. And he does dualism. Like the dualism things, like materialism not going to work, dualism's not going to work. It seems like whatever this thing is, it's not something in a category that the human being can deal with, right? Yeah. And you'll see him do the same thing with synchronicities. He ends the essay on synchronicity with the same kind of mic drop. He says, well, on the one hand, we can't make sense of this materialistically. On the other hand, we can't make sense of it just mentally because it has effects in the world. It looks like there's something else, like mind is something else, right? It's this other thing, okay? And this actually is one of the inspirations from my work on this, which is because I'm very much saying, yeah, it looks like human categories, even such broad human categories as physical and non-physical, don't seem to apply to this thing.
Right.
Right.
And so that's why I think like no one's really improved over Jung, and I'm not sure anyone can, because what would it be like for us to say something beyond all human categories?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't really go much farther than that.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the things I highlighted from the quote you put in the book, because I consider myself an experiencer, and I feel very much that world of it's physical, but it's not physical.
Right.
I've seen the physical. I even have captures of the physical, but I've also seen some things that are not physical, and I've had experiences that are not physical, and it doesn't make sense.
This was something that kind of got me when I first started encountering Whitney Strieber's stuff. Okay.
Right.
He'll recount, okay, he has this incredible experience, okay, and he's wonders, have I lost my mind? Right. And he goes to his doctor. I think this is one of the stories he tells. He goes to his doctor, and his doctor's like, I don't know about what you're saying here, but somebody definitely did harm you. Right. Like you definitely were raped, right? And I'm not making light of that at all. Okay. But you see what I mean? So it's sort of like it would be, you can't dismiss it projectively. Okay. Now, of course, we can project things that show up on our body, but that's a pretty extreme case, right? Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And so, and that for me is like the fascinating thing about this is how it just doesn't seem to fit particular categories, right?
So in your book, I think it's really good the way you take us back to the beginning and just really talking about this idea of thought and how it's plays relevance into, even comprehending even beginning to have a discussion about UFOs. Really, can you kind of talk about that a little bit and how important it is for us to re-engage our intellect into this, just the basics, I think, and at least that's for me how I feel.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I mean, I think in order for us to approach this, and for me, like why get into the basics of cognition to do this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think that's and obviously I think it's important because that's the very approach I take. Okay. Is so think of it this way: is people are claiming to see things. Or people are claiming to experience things, okay, that are anomalous. And by anomalous, we mean out of the ordinary. Okay. Right. They're not the way things go, right? The way we expect them to go. Okay.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if it's a UFO or if it's synchronicity, if it's near death, if it's psychedelic drugs, all these things. I think we have a similar kind of problem or question going on there. Okay. People are having experiences that don't fit what we're told to expect the way experience should go. Okay. And look, I'm not an experiencer, okay, but that's one of the most interesting things to me since I got into looking at this, just the overwhelming number of people who claim they are, okay. It's very impressive how many people are out there who claim to have these experiences. Yeah.
Really,
I'm not an experiencer either, and that's why Chris and we love the dynamic between the two of us because of that, because we have these differing perspectives on that.
Right.
And so for me as a philosopher, what I want to do is like, how is it I can like come up with a model for things where the anomalous makes sense, right? Where the unexpected is kind of what we would expect, where we could expect there to be unexpected things, where we could have a sense of what the normal is, but where we would not be surprised that a lot of weird stuff happens too. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
And for me, I think the best way to go about that is to look at human cognition and how human cognition works. Okay. And that's not to say that what I'm doing now is saying, well, Chris, your experience is just shadow projection or something like that. Okay?
Right. No, sure.
Yeah. The question for me is there a way we could like model this where in fact the experience is veridical, okay, while still having a coherent view of the world. All right. And I don't claim to know one way or another on that. That's not a
Right.
philosopher's job to know that. Okay.
Okay.
So, and and this is where I come from in my work in cognitive science and philosophy of mind before I took up the issue of the anomalous, right? A lot of us now have started to realize that the way human cognition works, right, is we enable ourselves to experience the world by limiting the scope of what we're open to experiencing. Okay. And I think it's an important kind of paradox, right?
True.
Like we enable cognition by limiting cognition. We enable perception by limiting perception. Okay. And so it looks like the way our perception works is we mostly sort out a very, very complicated world in terms of what is relevant to us practically as an organism. Okay. But then that means the way normal human perception goes is not really a good measure of what there is. Okay. Like we're always getting like a caricature, a simplification based on our needs as human organisms. Right. And I'm saying the stuff that we think we see, I think it's really there. I'm not an idealist. I think the real world's out there and we touch it practically and all that. But the point is we're only getting what's relevant to the human way of being, but there's no reason to think the human way of being is being as such. Okay.
Right.
So then if that's right, okay, if we basically kind of carve out an envelope of relevance for ourselves, okay, as a species, then we shouldn't be surprised that there's some stuff that we run into that just doesn't fit that envelope, right? That we evolved under certain conditions to deal with certain things, and that works really well. But now humans are like kind of out of our lane, our natural lane. We're going places, doing things that we've never gone and done before. So it doesn't surprise me that we would bump into things that we're just not set up to understand. Okay.
Yeah.
And those would be really alien to us, right? Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's kind of scary though. Are you going down? Because that seems to like hint that there's like no objective reality. Like, is there, you know what I mean? And that's like so scary to me to like try to like wrap my brain around that of if everyone, because and then you and Diana touched on this too, of like even like you can have a group of experiencers and they're looking at something, but they report it looking different. And that's just that's terrifying to me because as humans, we crave that, you know, stable, we crave predictability. And so the fact that if there's like no objective reality, like if we can't all look at that and see the same thing, you know, what does that mean for our lives, you know?
Yeah. Well, no, this is scary stuff, right? Okay. So I have no good news for you there.
Good point.
Oh no.
Yes. But so, okay. I like how you mentioned predictability. And this is actually stuff that I've researched since publishing the book. Okay. So you're getting the cutting edge, Jim, now. Okay. So, but Andy Clark, if you've read any of my books, you'd realize like Andy Clark's one of my heroes. I have like this, you know, man crush on Andy Clark. Okay. And in his most recent work, he's begun to defend something that's called the predictive theory of cognition or the predictive theory of perception. Okay. And it's not just Clark. There's a lot of people who do this now. And some of the models that have been most successful in modeling neurophysiological phenomena, okay, would show that when you're having ordinary visual perception, you've got pathways of information going in, and there's also pathways of information going out. Okay. Which do you think are more active when you're having visual perception, the inward pathways or the going out pathways?
Inward.
That's
but I feel like that's going to be wrong, isn't it?
It's wrong. Yeah.
I knew I was going to be wrong.
No, but thank you. I always say to my students,
set us up on purpose.
Good wrong answer. It's the wrong answer I wanted.
Yeah.
In some cases, it's actually 4-to-1 outward going information compared to inward going information. Interesting. Okay. And now, long story short, what Clark and a lot of cognitive scientists and psychologists and neuroscientists think was going on there is when you open your eyes, you don't just take in information innocently. You throw a prediction out there. Like your brain can't just start from scratch every time you open your eyes. Right? So you throw a prediction out there. Here's what I expect to see. This is like when you wake up in a hotel room, you're like where the hell am I? You're at. Yeah, because you wake up with a prediction of your room back home.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And then but like the second day you're okay because now you're starting to like predict. Okay. So Clark's point is like we mostly work by beginning with a prediction. All right. And then what the incoming information does is we only notice like when it's going against the prediction. Okay, it's like the incoming information is going to be adjusting the prediction. Okay, but here's the thing: we're very conservative with our predictions. Like when in doubt, keep the prediction, because why? That thing kept you alive yesterday. Okay, so we're constantly adjusting to it, but we're going to when the chips are down, stick to it. Okay,
conservative.
Yeah. Now, no, this doesn't mean we're out of touch with the world, right? Because we do adjust gradually over time our predictions as they start making errors, right? But in any one moment, it's sort of like we kind of grit our teeth and hold that prediction as best we can. Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
So I think this is very useful in thinking about some of the really, really weird UFO cases. Okay. Like my favorite one is one of the ones that Strieber talks about in Them, right? It's the one where you've got a guy driving down a very busy highway. I think it's somewhere in New York. Okay. And who actually was a perceptual psychologist. Okay. And he sees what he thought looked like, but was kind of off, like an airplane is going to crash into the highway. Okay. And no one else sees it. All right. And then he like pulls off for his exit, and there's like this circus of like maniacal clowns there jumping around, like menacing him, and no one else sees it. And then he like sees a billboard, I think, like take off like a spaceship. All right. Okay. So not too interesting, because you're like, well, that guy had a psychotic break. Sorry about that. Right. But, and I'm not laughing at people who have psychotic breaks, but then another person wrote Strieber a letter giving something similar, not exactly, but similar to that same thing in the same day and time. Okay. But note, everybody else on the freeway there, didn't report anything, right? Didn't seem to see anything. Okay. Well, I think with the predictive theory of perception or cognition, we can kind of make sense of that, right? What are we doing? We're throwing our predictions out there. And there's a tendency to ignore the things that really, really don't fit into the prediction, especially if they're not practically relevant, right? You're just trying to get home for dinner, and your brain's throwing the prediction out there of like, here's what you're going to see on the way home. And like, this is the map we've always operated by to get home, stuff like that. Oh, there's something from outside our normal envelope of relevance over there. Just ignore it, man. It's not what we're doing, right? We weren't expecting to see that. It's not relevant to what we're doing. Just keep going, right? But if it's so clear you can't ignore it, what are you going to do? You're going to try to make it fit the prediction, right? And I've seen airplanes before. I've seen circus clowns before, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why I think you get these sort of like weird, absurd things, but they're always in tropes that we've like experienced before, right? Does that make sense?
Very true.
Right?
Very true.
Yeah. And so it doesn't mean we're not in touch with the world at all. It just means, though, we kind of like, we operate by kind of like convenient fictionalizing of the world when we have to.
So could that explain why people who tend to have opened themselves up, there's that word, but just cognitively to the possibility of this. So as people started getting into it, 2017, 2021, that was my time frame, started opening myself up to some of these reports. Is that like my brain let information out that allowed me to see something?
Yeah. Or you were less tied to those predictions now.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. And then for me, one of the things I have, I don't really anymore, but when I was in San Diego, I was having repeated sightings, and they were daytime sightings. And the first time I had the sighting, it was, I saw it during the day, white orb, 3:11 p.m.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I went back the next day at the same time, and it was there again, and then daily. So it's really interesting to me, this idea of this prediction. And people have talked to me about like, what is it like? Are you, summoning them? And I said, no, for me, it's more like when I was a kid, I went hunting, grew up hunting and fishing, and you scope out the deer and you just learn to predict what they look like in that spot. And it's almost like I was able to see it in more of a predictive manner.
You're attuned to what's there. right?
That's so interesting.
So like
Yeah.
because something's happened that you've been like whacked with this thing somehow, right?
Literally.
So that like your normal, like your previous predictions
Totally.
that Ariel and I would walk around with, in ordinary normie reality, because we're gonna like stick to those because we're like ordinary normie people, and whatever happened, you know what I mean, like didn't whack us.
Yeah, Ariel tells me she won't even look outside at night out the windows.
You know what I mean? So let's say like the three of us go to the desert someplace. Like our brain may not just allow us to see it because it doesn't fit the prediction.
Right.
We're not consciously in control of this. Okay. Whereas once again, it may fit what you're predicting now. And it doesn't mean because it's predicted, it's not there. Like my brain's predicting, I'm going to see this cup, right? And that cup is really there. Okay. But do you see me? But if it really was radically against my prediction so that I couldn't practically get anything done if I admitted that was there, the brain's probably going to ignore that.
Right. And half the people who are watching this, if you hadn't mentioned it, wouldn't have seen the cup come onto the camera.
Yeah.
Because it's just not their focus at that time.
Not their focus. Yeah. And what if we have these like hard-grained focuses over time, these given predictions, and they would seem to like enable us to see some things but block other things. Right.
And I wonder, like, as far as religion and faith, like how that influences our predictions. Because, I'm a Christian, and, I believe in God, and, so I do come at it from more of like, be careful, like, because I don't really like, I don't want to see something that like could be evil, you know what I mean? And so I come at it from
I'm not
these
going out of
very
my way to see this stuff.
ingrained, like it's very deeply ingrained in me. Like, you don't want to like go looking for evil. You know what I mean? You don't want to go outside. Like, so I think that's probably, maybe like why some people, like, it's just our worldviews and our lenses and our paradigm through which we've learned. And, these things are just very deeply ingrained and they're hard to break out of,
Yeah.
I'll give you a sense of how hard it is to break out of this stuff. This is another example that Clark cites from the literature. Okay. You know what? You've heard about placebo experiments, right?
Yeah.
Where we can give people drugs that are actually completely inert and they'll get fabulous results from them. Okay.
Yep. Sugar pills.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of an honest placebo? Okay. Okay. So an honest placebo is where they tell you we're giving you a placebo.
Right. Yep. Yep.
You are told, you consciously know it's a placebo. Okay? And there have been experiments, I think, with pain relief and like some functionality with arthritis. I'm not sure on that one, right? But no, at least pain relief and maybe some functionality with arthritis, where they have said this is an inert pill. It will do nothing for you. And the people took it, and guess what happened?
It did something for them.
It did the thing. Okay.
Because the experience of taking the pill triggers your brain to think this needs to be doing something.
Yeah, exactly. And like they found that it was if just some dude shows up at your door with like a Ziploc baggie of assorted weird shaped pills, it's not going to do it. Okay. But if someone in a lab coat,
Right.
Oh yeah. And it's packaged like it looks like
the
authority. Yeah. Because what's again, like you for good reason have learned to like subconsciously trust this, and you're predicting relief when this happens. So then what's your brain do? It cherry picks the available experiences to confirm the prediction, right?
Yep.
And so, I mean, that's powerful because like you could really say, no, I know it's a placebo and I'm not going to fall for it. And guess what? You might just fall for it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so I think you're right, Ariel, is that like our religious views, our cultural views, biases for good or ill, all this stuff that's there. And I'm not saying it shows we aren't in touch with the real world. I think it's showing us there's a lot of aspects of the real world to be in touch with, right? And which ones we are in touch with is going to have a lot to do with like what we're bringing to it. Okay. Yeah. An example I'll use is like, so I'm very much in love with my wife, right? And so I'm going to notice things about her that no one else notices. Right. Because I'm absolutely enamored with her. Right. Okay. You know what I mean? Or like, right. And so that stuff's there, but you're not going to notice it because you're not in love with her. Right. Yeah. But it's really there. I'm not making it up. It's just, it's there. And I'm attuned to it, given my expectations, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Or, you're walking home on that scary night, or, you know what I mean? Like and so suddenly you notice like every twig in the tree
Yep.
rattling. You notice that person across the street who'd otherwise be innocuous.
Heightened awareness.
Heightened awareness. And that stuff's really there. It's always there. It's just you only notice it when you're heightened to it. Okay.
Yep.
And so I think once we see that that's how cognition works, then gosh, what the hell's in the room with me right now?
Right.
I'm just not attuned to. And I could be if I approached it differently, or I was a different kind of organism or something like that.
And I talk about that to people. I think that's one of the ways I explain is, just if we didn't have a microscope, imagine, I mean, if we never discovered all the bacteria on us, I mean, thank God we can't see that, right? If we saw everything the world as it is, we would be traumatized.
Yeah,
it would not be attractive.
And he says, like, I think it's a really good point. We would be traumatized both because there's like gross stuff out there. But we'd also be traumatized because it would be more than we can handle. Just be too much information, right? So we have to, in every situation, take this like maybe infinity of information that's there and winnow it down to something manageable through our attunements. Okay. And so if that's the case, then in every situation, there's more there than it meets the eye, as it were. Okay. But so you tell me that now, I think we're back to an enchanted world then.
I love that. And that's how I feel about it. It feels to me like my experience has made the world more enchanting, and like, just like I feel more connected and more, I don't know, it's just been, and I know not everybody has positive experiences, but for me, the experience itself was what it was, but the mental process it took me through has really changed who I am at my core level. And obviously that's not expected. But one question I have about that is, do you find, or have you found in your research so far, do people, it's interesting because you talked about this, in the very beginning, when you talked about this kind of our group shadow, our cultural shadow self, and how we were going through trauma, after the war, and then we started having these sightings. That sparked my interest because I often hear in experiencer stories that they're often going through some sort of trauma or pain point in their lives, and then it sparks these experiences. Have you heard that or noticed that?
Yeah, well, Jeff Kripal has talked quite a bit about that in his most recent work. And Jeff, whether it's UFO experiences, precognition, like
other anomalous experiences.
In Kripal's our guy, like for like the
I really need to spend some time reading some of him.
Yeah, definitely. But he says that he's noticed a correlation with everybody he's dealing with, not everybody, almost everybody he's dealing with in these experiences is trauma. Trauma seems to be a very common thread to that. So think of it. Okay. So, like this whole like predictive model, I'm sorry to be like going back to that, but it helps.
No,
right? It makes sense of PTSD, because like when something really traumatic happens to you, what happened to all your predictions? They all got disconfirmed. You got whacked by something, and like suddenly your whole apparatus of sense making doesn't make sense now. And so you don't have a prediction that you're running with anymore, right? And so now you're attuned to everything that slithers by, okay? Which might mean you see more than the rest of us, okay? Like, you know what I mean? Like the threats that the traumatized person sees, they're there. They are there.
They are,
You can't put them aside, okay? Right? You know
Very
what I mean?
good point.
And so once again, like it makes sense. Like the traumatized, right? Because the basic model has not worked out and it's been refuted, and their brain is like struggling to have a model. They're going to be attuned to things, I think, that the rest of us aren't, because we're like comfortable in our like ordinary envelope of human experience. But once that's been busted open for you, you're going to see stuff.
Which makes all the synchronicities that happen at that same time, it all makes sense, because you're seeing these things that you would never, they happened before, you just didn't see them. You weren't.
Because like for those of us for whom like ordinary normie predictions have worked out well, for in my case 50 years, right? I don't need to question anything, okay? But like if I had some like deeply violent combat experience that was contrary to everything I was taught to expect about reality, well, now normie reality doesn't work for me anymore, and I'm going to be attuned, and maybe I'm going to see things other people don't see. and maybe they're really there. Yeah.
Wow.
And I also think some people's brains are just wired this way. Like, some people who have autism or, some form of neurodivergence, their brains are, sometimes they do kind of live in this state of hyper awareness to like certain things like germs or, things like that. So, sometimes you're just wired that way.
Exactly. Or take sometimes you'll have neurodivergent people who can't stand touch, right?
Right.
Okay, like even wearing clothes can be a problem. Okay.
Yep.
That's stuff that they're feeling is really there.
Yeah.
No, you're exactly right. Yeah.
Like the shirt on your back was there before I mentioned it, but you just weren't
You
attuned
didn't
to
think
it.
about it.
Yeah.
You didn't.
So
Yeah.
who's getting the world right? You in your normie way or the neurodivergent person?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, like the neurodivergent person is attuned to something that's really there.
Yep. Yep.
It really calls
Absolutely.
into question some of our past theories. At least in my opinion, it does. And I say this coming from somebody who grew up with a brother who was schizophrenic. But really about what they're experiencing and what reality they're seeing that we may not be seeing. I really wonder about that now, and it makes me more in tune with that understanding.
Could there be an insight? Could there be an insight in schizophrenia? Okay, now I'm not saying schizophrenic people should not be helped or something like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, could there be an insight to it? Maybe there can be. Yeah.
Right.
Can I give another a recent example? I think that really helps make some of these points. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Of course.
Sure. So there's a contemporary philosopher, an Italian named Maurizio Ferraris. Okay. And he uses what he calls the slipper example. And he says, suppose there's a slipper on my living room floor. Okay. And here he is. He's attuned to it in the normal human way. He gets it visually, and he understands it as something you would put on your foot to keep it warm or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But he can get his dog to fetch the slipper. All right. And the dog is, by our standards, nearly blind, but it can smell where it is,
Yeah.
And it doesn't see it as something you put on your foot to keep your foot warm, all these things. So the dog is attuned to the slipper, and it gets to the slipper, but it gets to it through an entirely different type of attunement than ours.
Oh my gosh.
That's
crazy.
Yeah. And so who's getting the slipper right? Us or the dog? We both are, right? Because the slipper is more than it is to us. It is the way it is to us, but it's more than that. It's also the way it is to the dog. Okay.
Wow.
I know, isn't that cool? This is Ferraris' example. Now let's suppose there's he says a worm crawling on the rug. Well, the worm's gonna crawl over or around the slipper, so it's attuned to it, right?
Yeah.
But it's gonna be attuned to it at levels of like chemical awareness and stuff like that we are not at all attuned to.
Yeah.
And he even says, what if there's a plant growing? Well, the plant's gonna grow over or around or through it, right? So it deals with the slipper. It's attuned to it. So who's getting it right? Well, Ferraris would say we all are.
Right.
But how many possible ways are there to be attuned to that slipper?
Wow.
Maybe infinitely. Yeah. So
so
the slipper in its full reality always eludes us. It always withdraws further back into the world than any possible attunement to it. But that doesn't mean we don't get it, right? I'm not saying we just make up the slipper. It's there, and it's there the way we see it. But there's infinitely many ways it is beyond us. And and you can think of it so the slipper's enchanted. Right?
Yeah. And you talk about that, right? This perception of the world we're in, our life world, is that the word?
Yeah. Lebenswelt. Yeah. Life world. Yeah.
Yeah. This concept that, I am Chris because, of everything that my environment has been around me all my life, my parents, the food I've tasted, the world I've lived in, the everything that makes me me. So my perception can never be really what Ariel's perception is or what Jim's perception is. And I think that's really, it's obvious, but we don't really highlight that enough, I think.
Right.
Because it is such a different way to look at how we interact with each other and understand each other even.
Totally.
And really come with a place of love and understanding for each other as humans, because we are such different, beings, really.
Agreed. Yeah. And of course, and that doesn't mean there isn't a real world. Like, but these are
Exactly. Yeah.
And in fact, there's a very real world. That slipper is so real, we don't think we exhaust it by our perception of it. Right.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And then the world is so real, I can't say my take on it is the only possible take on it. Like Ariel's
Right.
matters, Chris's matters, even if I can't fully get to that.
Understand it.
And that's so important in relationships, because I know, like, my husband and I, you have those conversations of like, well, this is how it made me feel. And then he's like, well, this is how it made me feel. And it's like, well, neither one of us is wrong here, but we need to understand that we're coming at it from completely different perspectives. So it's going to make you feel one way and me feel another way. How can we work through it?
And they're both valid.
Right.
Yeah.
My wife, the marriage therapist, would very much approve of what you're saying there, Ariel. So.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you allude to this in the book. But one of the theories I've come to is, just this idea: are we being domesticated?
Yeah.
And I don't know that we're alluding to the fact that we're being domesticated, but this idea of us being the the other being that is trying to navigate this world, I guess, in a way that is
You mean like lower on the food chain or something?
yeah, like, I guess my thought process is, what if that's what's happening? I don't know, this is just a thought.
Yeah.
What if we're being domesticated somehow? And
what do you mean? I'm sorry, what do you mean domesticated? Like, in the fact that, like, we're being manipulated to serve a purpose, or what do you mean?
Yeah, and when I say manipulated, I don't always use that word in a negative connotation, because I don't know, I look at dogs. I mean, look at our pets, right? Look at our situation. We have these animals that we've over time domesticated to have a relationship with us and to serve our purposes, and then we also mutually serve theirs at some point. Is that something that could be going on with these things? And are we being exposed to them in a way, like, to prepare us for some sort of different type of relationship? I mean, I know that's just a theory. I'm just thinking about how this plays out.
It's funny how right now we're very worried about AI controlling our lives, right? And that we're going to become domesticated by AI. All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a film.
I am.
Yeah, I am too. Right? But
I am too. I'm Chris. Chris, maybe not so much.
Okay,
she and I get into this all the time.
So Ariel, though, here's more bad news for you. Okay. I think it happened about probably 60 or 70 years ago. Okay. And so there's a film, like, here's some homework. I want you to go watch a film called Failsafe. All right.
Okay.
And I believe it was in 1962. No, maybe 64, because I think the president figure in it is obviously based on Kennedy. Okay. But
Kennedy.
It's an early 60s film. All right. And the theme of the film is a nuclear war gets accidentally tripped off. All right. And nobody can take it back. All right. Because it's very clear we don't run things anymore. Our technological systems do. Okay. And it's unclear, like, why this happened. Like, it may be just that the system decided to do it. Okay. And there's no taking it back. And the point of the film is to say, and this is before, in the popular imagination, anybody is thinking about conscious computers or literally intelligent computers. The point is like, humans have abdicated control of their lives to these larger systems. I call them HyperObjects, right? These hyper systems that transcend us in time and space and complexity, so we don't even understand them. We might have initiated them, but now we've let them loose and they're running us now. Okay.
Ariel.
And I think a great example of it is like the Manhattan Project. Like, who really ran that thing? And like, if you even hear like the higher ups, like Oppenheimer, if you take the film, as evidence of this, is like, early on they're saying, well, we need to do this because of the Nazis, but then, like, the Nazis surrender. Well, we need to do it because of the Russians, or just because we're going to do it. Like, no one really even has an answer of why we're doing it anymore.
But it's just like taking us over.
It's taken us over. And like, in 99.99% of the people involved in the project didn't even know they're involved in the project. Right. They wouldn't have believed the nuclear weapon was possible until they saw one set off, right? Okay, all this. And so who ran that? The Manhattan Project ran that.
Ugh.
You know what I mean? So the idea is I would say is we were taken over by technological systems by 1945.
Wow.
Okay? Maybe earlier.
Wow.
Do you see what I mean? And this is what like people already in the 1930s who are like philosophers like worried about technology are already worried about 1930s. Like who runs things now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so are we being domesticated? Are we being harvested? I think yes, we are. Maybe not by aliens from Alpha Centauri, okay, but by our own systems that we have like surrendered our lives to. Yes, we are. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Right.
No,
See, okay, now this leads into like more of, this just feeds something that I struggle with. I struggle with bouts of like deep, like existential angst.
Yeah.
And so, you tell me these things and that's going to just fuel those bouts. But like, how do you, as we move more towards this reality, because there's no stopping it. We all know that when it comes to AI, when it comes to technology, there is no stopping it. It will become what it's going to become, and there's nothing we can do about it. And so then that's part of the existential angst is, we can't stop it. What do we do? What is the meaning of life? What is reality? What's going to happen? And, at the end of the day, how do you kind of move out of that in sort of a practical sense? I know that like philosophy is more of like, not so much of the practical, but do you have any practical advice for, those bouts of existential angst and crisis?
Yeah. So like one, I think it's important to know, and it seems that apocalypse is like the recurring human tradition. Condition. Like every generation is like convinced it's the last one.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. Partly because we're technological extenders and we're always extending to our environment, but then somebody comes with a new idea how to extend to the environment. So then like the old way is always dying and the new way is always coming on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You see that. Now, I do think this one that we're going through now is pretty special. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it does seem that we're losing control. Okay. But I also think we might ask ourselves, when is it that we think humans ever had control?
Right.
Like when was this golden age? It doesn't seem like there was one. Do you see what I mean? Okay. I'm not saying there aren't like particular threats now that we should worry about, etc. Okay.
Right.
But there never was a golden age, right? Okay. And here's the thing is the fact that the three of us are sitting here in some sense together having this conversation, right, is showing we're stepping out of it. We can still separate ourselves enough of it to like contemplate it and to worry about it. Do you see what I mean? Okay.
Yeah.
And so like one of my my favorite contemporary philosophers, a guy named John Hogwin, has a famous quip that he says, like the problem with artificial intelligence is that computers just don't give a damn about anything. Okay. But we humans, we do give a damn, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I don't have hope that like our grandkids are going to be able to resist the microchip in the head. Okay. Right. All right. But I do have hope in the sense that like right now we are resisting this and are very concerned about it. Like we're still evidencing to ourselves that we are human. There is something different about us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So I think like the very anxiety and dread you're feeling about it is the relief too of that anxiety and dread, because you're still human, Chris is still human, Jim's still human, your husband is, your kids are, you know what I mean? And like 2 generations from now, I don't know. I hope the lights haven't gone out, but the more we think and speak and educate, the more we can kind of keep the lights on for the people around us.
Yeah. I love that. That is so good.
Yeah. It's all we have, right?
Yeah. Uh-oh, Chris, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I also try and think about like how many paradigm shifts have we been through that people have felt this way. You know, I mean, you know, I don't know what it was like when, you know, when they said the earth was round and everybody freaked out, or, you know, what were those?
Yeah, but those were still just ideas though. Those were still just ideas that reframed how we saw reality. This that we're talking about could like biologically, like artificially change us though.
Right. But do you think that people back then didn't think that there was some impact that would have on their world that they could not, you know what I'm saying? They probably had these existential crises about what they were thinking.
I'll give you a great example. Okay, so in one of Plato's dialogues, right, he recounts Socrates coming out very strongly against the written word.
Wow.
Socrates is saying, well, if we start writing stuff down, then we won't remember anything anymore, and we'll be dependent on paper and pen. Okay.
Wow.
He was worried that this new technology, the written word, is going to ruin us. Okay, yeah.
That's so insane, because I'm worried that not having the written word is going to ruin us.
Yeah. And it's to the point though, is like once again, we're always living in an apocalypse. We're always feeling the demise of the prior world in favor of a new revelation of how being can be. I'm not saying all the revelations are good, right?
Yeah.
What I worry about the current one we're going through, though, is, and I bring this out in both the books that came out last year, is because as my view is like what separates us from the machine is our giving a damn. It's our fear of mortality. It's our fear of being overcome. And I just worry what we're seeing now is we're just losing the sense of giving a damn. We're losing the sense of right.
Yes.
If that happens, then that is the end. Then, right? And that's why I think, Ariel, I want your anxiety. I want to cause your anxiety. Why? because in as much as you're experiencing it, you're not a machine.
Yeah. Well, mission accomplished.
Very good. Good.
And maybe there's people like me that have had to experience what I had to experience to bring me to give a damn again.
Yes.
You know, because I think about that a lot, and listening to Callie Chase talk about her anomalous experience on her first, her episode recently. Yeah. This idea, well, she said she's mentioned it differently, but a lot of people, their intellect, the way I'll say it is my intellect has been re-engaged. And life, I think when I was really conservative Christian for many, many, many years, and I had exposure to, more philosophy and thought, and and then you kind of gave that up over the years. And I feel like, I really didn't give a damn about anything I did give a damn about important things, but to me, it drove me to like another level of this is something, on a higher level, an existential level.
I agree. 100%. Right.
So interesting.
Yeah. And so, I think, in general, people are misunderstanding what the threat of technology is, right? I think they're too worried about particular technologies like AI, though I'm not saying there's nothing to worry about with AI. And they don't realize that it seems that we were overcome in the most important sense a long time ago already. Yeah.
I'm sort of curious it kind of goes along with what we were talking about, this idea of apathy and not caring anymore. This has been so fascinating to me in the topic of the UFO phenomenon, as some people are just very naturally drawn to this topic and some people are just inherently closed off. And it kind of dovetails with the Plato's cave of like why some people are able to break out and why some people just never are. I mean, what do you have any theories on on that?
A couple of things in that vicinity. First of all, like in light of what we've talked about earlier in this conversation, we should wonder, is the cave a feature or is it a bug? Okay, because it does seem like we do need a cave to make sense of anything. We need kind of a given sense of the real, kind of an easy caricature of the reality to get around with. Okay, but at a certain point, though, it could be that we maneuver to places where our cave isn't doing it anymore, and something is hitting us. Okay, and so, but now going to your question directly, how do we account for the fact that somebody got out of the cave and somebody didn't?
Yeah.
Right? Well, one, it's maybe if it's okay, Chris, I'll use you an example. You didn't get a vote in it, did you? Right?
No.
Like something showed up, right? You know what I mean? Like
I thought I was like, open to the idea, but I had no idea that I would have the experience.
Yeah.
It's
So it could be that just
Yeah.
something traumatic or just overwhelming happens and it shatters all your predictions, and now you're outside in the sun and can't see anything. You see what I mean? So it could happen like that, right? But then what do you do with like people like Ariel and Jim, who kind of have gotten to the edge of the cave just by thinking really hard about it? Like, why is it we were able to do that? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that I don't know. I think that's a bit of a mystery. It's a bit of
Yeah.
a mystery, right?
Yeah.
You know, that for some reason we were just more worried about it than other people. We just kind of gave a damn more about that. I'm not saying we're superior or something like that, but we just,
Right.
for whatever reason, we're more worried and spent more time thinking about it, and like kind of have thought our way into a point where we're like, I think there's something out there, right?
Mhm.
Even if we can't get to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good.
It is clear, using Plato's example, in the Republic, it's just left as a mystery of why the prisoner gets out. It's just one day he's let loose, and why he's let loose, it can't really be his own doing, right?
Mhm.
Because he's not enlightened, and the unenlightened can't enlighten for Plato. So how he gets out, it seems like it's a mystery, and something had to happen to him.
Mhm. And then what kind of role does the dialectic play, and how can we form communities around this idea of elevating conversation and exchange of ideas? Because that is one thing that I am really scared is going to go away with technology is, we're becoming ever so isolated, and we're going to lose in-person communities.
Yeah, and I just think you have to insist on them, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, look, what we're doing here is great, okay,
Mhm.
but it's better if we were like sitting at a coffee shop someplace.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, Chris was buying, but we would be talking, right? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that would be better, okay?
Yeah,
I agree.
You know what I mean? But this is the only way we're available to them. I do think we have to insist on the in-person thing. I think your husband's jiu-jitsu gym is a great thing, right? Because he's going to go there.
Yeah.
He's going to have to touch people, right?
Yeah. Very much so.
Yeah, and then let alone talk to him too, right? And so I do think just insisting on like direct community is important, right?
Yeah.
And going out of our way for it. And I think increasingly it's weird that you have to make a special effort. You know what I mean? If you're going to see,
you go out with someone.
yeah,
Yep.
and like I remember, when I was a kid, you didn't make appointments with other kids' parents to hang out.
Right. Yep.
Now you virtually have to like make an online appointment to get people's kids together, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to insist on that spontaneity and like literal like giving people
community
hugs
gathering
stuff. Yeah.
Be intentional. I think it's be intentional about relationships, and I think it's so one of the things that I struggled with after COVID, and I'm an extrovert. Like I have always considered myself to be an extreme extrovert, and then COVID came and it completely changed. And this whole process was all happening around the same time. So, I mean, you also go through ontological shock, and then you're like the crazy lady who believes in UFOs. So then you really don't want to talk to people. Like you feel like, I don't want to put myself out there, and what am I going to do? Go to coffee with someone and talk about UFOs? Like, this is so,
Tell me about your abduction.
Exactly.
Well, Chris, I haven't been abducted, but
so you just become this, you don't even know how to re-engage in life again sometimes.
Yeah.
And actually the podcast has been great for us, because I reached out to Ariel, just fell in love with her online, and her beautiful character, and just her
you guys met electronically
on Twitter.
Really? Okay, I thought you were going to tell me you were like college roommates or something, right?
No.
We literally called each other. I said, let's do a podcast, what do you think? And she's like, let's do it. And we just connected, so it's been great.
I'll tell you this is okay. I have like resisted teaching online for very much a lot of these reasons, right? Okay. But I'll say this is the morbid anatomy thing like kind of changed me on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Especially that last class that I sat in on, Ariel, that you did with
I had my cam turned off every episode, so you probably never saw me, but
Sure. No, you were there. Yeah, I remember.
yeah, I
talked to
was
you.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd say that was a great example. I think there was like real community in that class.
Yeah.
I really
People
think
were really opening up and sharing. I was blown away, but I think because it was a course with a limited number of people, we all knew we wanted to be there. We knew what the course material was, really made it a safe space for people.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. So that some things like that have kind of opened me up that there might be something available electronically that is humane. I would rather sit down in a classroom, right?
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? But I do think, but thing is increasingly as these things, as we like continue to fragment and things like that, we are going to have to cultivate, I think, even electronic modes of expression for authentic human interaction. And I think those online classes, I think, are an interesting possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm so glad that you're doing one, by the way. Like, I am so happy because I know, because when you were having your guest slot and, she would say like, okay, Jim, like, do you have anything to add? And then you would talk for a while and it was like, man, like this guy needs to do his own class because, you have so much to say. You're such a good teacher. You're so engaging. I'm like, he needs to be doing this on his own. So he doesn't just like pop in and out,
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And the thing is, okay, so I teach at a small college. Okay. And so the people I work for don't care what I write. Okay. They'd probably rather I didn't do it. Right. Okay. Because I am so like, I am here to teach. I teach, 4 classes a semester. That's what I do. Right. That's the thing. And I've done that, for over 20 years now. And so teaching at the end of the day is really what I do. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Whether I want to admit that or not. Right. But that is what I do. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, tell us more about that class. If you're offering it out.
And your books. Yeah. Tell us about your books and the class and like where everyone can find you, follow you, get your information, what's your Twitter handle, all that.
Sure. So I'm doing a class for morbid anatomy. It's simply called Unidentified Flying HyperObjects. It's more or less based on the book that was published last year by Apocalypse, by that title. Though I want to be careful because like I feel badly if like people bought the book and they come to the class and it's essentially just a rehash of the book. I don't think that's helpful, right? But also people who haven't read the book, I want them to get it, right? So it's going to be a mix. It's going to be a kind of like, here's the basics of the book, and now here's where like
some other stuff.
Yeah. So like say for instance the slipper example, that's not in the book, right?
Yeah.
I've read that since that the predictive theory of mind. That's just I've actually discovered that I've read about it since publishing the book. So it's kind of like a snapshot of where I am a few months later.
Right? I think it's great because Ariel knows this about me. When I was a child, I was an avid reader, like love reading. I read so much. And at some point during my life, I just struggle with it. I'm getting my master's right now and I am struggling with all the reading and, just comprehension. And I love reading your book and it's actually great and easy to read, but I still think there's so much value. Number one, there's value with anyone audibly going through something with somebody like me, who's, more tactile and listen. I learn through all the methodologies versus just, reading or whatever. So I think that's fantastic that you're offering that. And I think don't underestimate the value you'll add just by, the dialogue, like you said, the dialectic, you can't beat that. You really can't beat that.
Yeah.
So.
For the class, I want to make maybe even the majority of the meetings about question and answers, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming most of the people in the class have probably encountered the book, right? Yeah. So, but I had another book come out last year. Actually, this is like within 2 weeks of the UFO.
Oh my
book.
gosh.
It's been busy.
That's crazy.
It's called Thinking About Thinking, and it's a book in philosophy of mind, right? So it's thinking about thinking, mind and meaning in the era of technological nihilism. Okay. And so really like the UFO book is sort of like an application of what I do in that book, kind of a thought experiment based on what I do in that book. Right. But you can find me on Twitter. What am I? I'm JD Madden 3 on Twitter. Yeah. And I have a website, jdmadden.com. Right. So feel free to, I have a Substack, which I think, gosh, I have a dumb name. It's just Jim Madden's newsletter or something like that. So
Okay.
but I have a Substack that I publish on it like maybe monthly, bi-monthly, because if you've seen it, like I put up like big, like 30,000 word essays on
Oh my
thing.
gosh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So maybe like 20,000 word essays on it. Yeah. So
That's
so that's one reason I don't like to monetize it, because I can't guarantee you I'm gonna have something up every week. It's like these
It's
kinds
big,
of things.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And
That's
so if anyone wants to chase me down in those places, they can get me there.
Very
Awesome.
cool. Before I don't know if you're ready to go, Ariel. I wanted to ask, what do you, if you still have time, what do you think about disclosure and a post-disclosure world?
Yeah.
What do you think it'll look like if we were to have some sort of disclosure?
Yeah. So I don't know, because it depends what's disclosed. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And who discloses it?
And who discloses it? And the thing is now I think we're in this, post-truth environment, right? Not I mean, I think there still is truth, but like we're like,
right.
But like
we don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So someone from the government comes out and says, "Well, here it is. This is the reality of it." At this point, why would you believe that?
Right. That's the problem.
Exactly.
That is the problem.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And so for me, like, I don't need disclosure to know that the world is weirder than like our normal common sense ways that we've developed would predict it to be. Okay.
Right.
So what more do I need then? Right. If once I admit the world is really freaking weird, I'm going to listen to Chris. Right? You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of times with disclosure, I don't quite know what people want. Right. And I get there needs to be secrets. I get that. Okay. There's good reasons for secrets and things like that. Okay. And increasingly too, for me, the nuts and bolts side of the UFO thing is the less interesting part of it to me. And I think, probably 99% of that stuff is our stuff, right? Okay. You know what I mean? I don't doubt that. Okay. And the more I get into this, the more I think about it, it really is the experiencer stuff that is the interesting piece of the puzzle to me.
Yeah.
Okay. And the experiencer stuff seems to predate, right?
Right.
Jeff's work, Diana's work, it predates, right?
Yeah.
The modern UFO thing, right? Okay. And so increasingly I'm kind of indifferent to the disclosure thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Sounds like kind of like what Kelly was saying, it's like I don't see it. I really don't see a formal disclosure working per se. Like my kids, they're in their 20s and 30s, early, they don't, like you said, they don't give a damn. Well, they give a damn about a lot of things that are important. They just can't afford to give a damn about some of this stuff because they're in their own struggle. They're in trying to survive, pay their bills, figure out how to get through day to day.
Yeah.
And what's scares me about
this might be the privilege of midlife, right? So
yeah.
Maybe. I've never had it. I feel like I've never had a choice. And my brother and I were talking about this one time of how I was like having a conversation with my best friend. And, I was asking her these questions, like these existential questions of like, don't you ever think about like, what are we even doing here? What is the nature of reality? What the heck is going on? And my best friend just goes, oh, I just don't think about that. And my brother and I are going, you have a choice. You can choose not to think about this stuff because I don't feel like I have a choice. Like it's kind of this outside thing and I'm going to think about it, whether I like it or not.
My first childhood memory is thinking about this stuff.
Yes, me too, actually.
Yeah, and like this, I like to talk about the Dave Grush dilemma. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so, look, I can neither believe nor disbelieve what David Grush says. I'm just in no position to do that. Okay.
Right.
But like if what he says is either true or false, right? It is either true or it's false. Okay. If what he says is true, then that's really displacing because like the full X-Files lore is true then. Okay?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Like,
I'm still not a sci-fi person, so I got to catch up. But anyway,
meaning like Roswell happened and there's bodies and like the Vatican had a UFO and like all the classic UFO lore is true,
Right.
if what Dave
Right.
Rush is saying is true. Okay, that's displacing, especially like I've always mistrusted that lore.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've seen that lore. I've always held that part of it at a distance, right? Okay. But if what he says is false, well, that's pretty weird too, because somebody very powerful, I'm not saying like Grush, but either him or someone behind him, wants us to believe the X-Files is true. Okay. That's weird too, right? Like, why would people want us to believe a science fiction? Okay. You shouldn't. So it seems to me like post Grush, you're out of options. Like, like something weird is going on one
Either
way
way.
or another.
Yeah.
So welcome to the weird world. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a really true statement. And I think that I think you did see a shift a little bit, you know, when Grush came out, because it was almost another level of people saying, okay, we really do have to pay attention to this more.
Yeah.
And whatever it is.
Yeah. Whether it's as Grush is claiming to have been told it is, or whether it's not that way at all, and somebody wants us to believe it's Wake. I mean, both of those possibilities are very displacing.
Yes.
Right.
And
so
I think
going
makes
back
it
to
more
disclosure,
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it makes it very uncomfortable. And going back to the disclosure question, you can see why I don't care one way or another, right? Because either way, it seems like something is mediating between us and the real deal here, and that's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense that there's a control mechanism involved with this?
Like jog valets? Are you talking about jog valets control system?
The control system, or some other, like you said, I mean, you almost said we turned it over to technology.
Yeah. That's how I was going to
say. So that's exactly what your argument is the control system is there. It's just we created it and then turned it over to that.
Or we set something loose that's interacting with something else, right?
Or something else.
Yeah. And there's like a new systematic whole, right? There's something out there in the beyond our relevance sorting, and we let something loose, and now that's interacting, and now it's taken off on its own, and we're encountering it coming back at us, right? And that could be, I think that's true of our economy. It's true of our technological systems. It's true of our food systems, everything. We are dealing with things beyond our ken. Even if we initiate them, we're dealing with things that are above our pay grade, right?
Yep.
And do you think these systems are living systems? Do you take that idea that all systems are living systems, or essentially, and including, like I noticed in your book, like you said, like the IRS. I mean, you know, that if the IRS, if I'm having a conversation with my husband and I'm talking about taxes, the IRS is in the room. There's it's almost like a conscious entity that is influencing the direction we're going to go on decisions we make.
Here's a good example. I might use this in the book. I can't remember if I use this in the book or not. Is cognitive scientists love termites. Okay. Because termites are very easy to simulate, like on computer models, right? And robots and stuff. Because the termites got like two directions. You know, it's like make mud ball, roll it till you get to something that smells like you, leave it there, repeat. Like that's it. That's what a termite does. Okay. But if you get enough termites doing that, they'll stack up and make these incredible, like complicated cathedral-like structures that are the termite mounds. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But none of the termites has any clue what it's involved in.
Right.
It's just going about doing its little termite thing. Right. But meanwhile, it's being controlled by this system. That is the termite.
She hates it.
Yeah. So think of your friend Ariel who doesn't like to think about stuff, right? He or she's just going around doing the termite thing, right? Following the instructions, and meanwhile participating in this grand system.
Yep.
That's the termite colony, which I would say is an object, is an entity. It's like a living thing in its own. It has control of its parts. It survives the replacement of its parts. And the colony is running it for the termites. The little termites don't even know that they're essentially serving something else. Yeah.
That's so true.
So that's very much how I think of it.
I mean, it's true about everything.
Brain is broken. You broke my brain today. You did it.
Like, what are you? You are the control system of every cell in your body.
Yeah.
Like, where are you in your body? Well, you're not anywhere in there. You're the control system.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then you even go down a further rabbit hole when you realize that things like certain parasites can control you, can control, like a cat, and attract it, and then, implant the parasite in it. And
Oh gosh.
and
like
it
these like
literally controls
bacteria.
the brain and drives its behavior. And we have bacteria within us that's doing that.
Like the bacteria in my gut has a serious vote in my cognition. We know that.
Yes.
Okay, so the control, like, there's a symbiosis above and below and over. It's all overlapping, right? So who's running this? Well, there's all sorts of, like, Timothy Morton in some of his later work says, like, we're kind of like haunted everywhere, right? By other things that are from below and above and all over. Well, yeah, but once again, like welcome to, an enchanted world, right?
Enchanted world. I love it.
Yeah,
that's probably a good place to maybe stop.
Probably a good place.
Yeah, that's a great wrap up. Welcome to the enchanted world.
I know. It's like, I need to stop now and like integrate this and process all of this now before like I just end up on the ground. I'm just kidding.
But think of it like this. Okay, so here's the thing now. If I'll let you go, sorry, but now like we've got to like all go back and like ask ourselves, okay, what do we participate in? Like, what are the systems that we're in? What are the systems? What are we the termites to? What colony are we the termites in? Right. And I think that is important information to us. Right.
But I only think we can determine that to a certain extent. Like, I don't even know if we can determine it to a certain extent, but I don't know if there's ever like an actual end to that.
Agreed. 100% agreed.
Right. 100%. But going through the exercise might be beneficial. I mean, we actually did this in my class, not really personally, but it was, we had to research our city that we live in and all the living system of our city and how everything, how everything integrates into each other. And, I mean, it's just fascinating to see everything is living and it counts on its parts, and I'm part of it, right? I put out my trash and the trash guy comes, and it is a living system and we're part of our environment.
And you put your trash out that day because that's trash day, right? So you're like a termite there, right?
Yep.
Right?
Oh gosh. Rolling it out.
And we could get you to do it on a different day if we wanted to, and the system. But who really decides that? The system decides it.
Yeah, it's true. Oh my gosh.
She's gonna rest her
this
brain.
was so much fun. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. Ever since I encountered you, I've been so excited to chat with you and just pick your brain. And like, I'm sure, like, please come back someday. We would love to continue this conversation.
I've had an absolutely great time talking to you two. So anytime, let me know.
Oh,
if you're hard up for a guest, you can get me to come on. So
hey, I was like, what? We're getting him? This is amazing.
I know.